My name is Kumi Naidoo. I'm the Executive Director of Greenpeace International. The moment of history that we find ourselves in the world right now can be described as a perfect storm or a boiling point. We see a convergence of multiple crises in a very concentrated space of time. We have an ongoing poverty crisis, a climate crisis that is getting more serious by the day, we have a financial crisis, we have a crisis of governance and human rights. And when you see all of these crises emerging and the scale of each of these crises, what is very clear is that the world we live in today is clearly not the best that humanity can fashion for itself. Anybody who says that this is the best we can do clearly does not have even a basic sense of vision. So therefore, when the world is fundamentally unjust in so many ways, when inequality is rising to a point of absolute unsustainability and so on, it is clear that we need fundamental, substantial, transformative change. If we look at from the Arab resistance for human rights and democracy and good governance, if we look at the Occupy movement, if we look at the resistance we saw in Turkey around the Gezi Park campaign, as well as in Brazil recently around the question of massive hike in public transportation costs, these mobilizations have not had big international NGOs as key players. If anything, international NGOs were behind the pace. So therefore today, I believe very strongly that international NGOs run the risk of actually becoming irrelevant if they do not actually position themselves much closely with the constituencies in whose name we actually do our work. So for Greenpeace, we are working really hard to build a more people-centric organization. We are instituting now for the first time mechanisms to consult with not only our existing supporters, but to try to design ways where ordinary people who are in the social media space, for example, can help give us feedback on how and what we should be campaigning on and how we should go about doing it. If people who are directly affected speak about something, they speak with much greater passion, integrity, eloquence and authenticity. And it's the ethically right thing to do, but it's also, if you want to win, it's a strategically correct thing to do. In all our work Greenpeace is doing now in Indonesia, in the Sumatran rainforest, in Amazon, whether we're working on toxics or sustainable agriculture and so on, we are seeking to work more and more closely with local communities. And I would say though, that it's not easy to do. There's a cultural change that international NGOs need to go through, and I'm not saying that Greenpeace has got it right. We have just started a journey towards hopefully getting it right in the future. What we must understand is that one of the biggest reasons why we're not winning, why there's such a governance failure, is a silo mentality that exists in governments, right? So you have these territorial ministries and the lack of cohesion and synergy between ministries and so on holds us back. Sadly, that same reality mirrors itself in the civil society space. And I think that it is incredibly important for us to find the right balance between specialization and integration. It is true that for certain battles to be won, to have specialist organizations that do the high-level research, do the high-level planning and so on, there is strategic value in that. But to believe today that any sectoral organization can actually win, whether it's an environment or poverty and so on, without understanding how whichever issue you're pursuing is interconnected with other issues, is a failure of strategy. When I started at Greenpeace, many people said, many of the media actually, when the first week were asking me things like, oh, so your whole life you've been in the anti-poverty, human rights and gender equality movement, and now you're leaving that movement to go join the environment movement. Aren't you selling out? And I have maintained for a long time now, and certainly going into this Greenpeace job, that the struggle, for example, to end global poverty and secure human rights on the one hand, and the struggle to avert catastrophic climate change must and has to be seen as two sides of the same coin. And so my summation is that not that there is absolutely no space for specialization, but we need to have specialization with maximum integration, and we don't have that at the moment. And I think it's a failure of leadership in the NGO sector, and we need to address this failure, otherwise we are betraying the constituencies of people that we campaign with, and for them, they don't care, right? People who are on the ground, people who are fighting and surviving on a daily basis, they don't care about how the international NGO sector organizes itself, for example. And I think we should, can and must be doing better with breaking down the silos that exist within civil society campaign. All the contradictions, all the inequalities, all the power differentials that exist in society at large and global society at large manifests itself in global civil society. I would say, yes, we need to ask ourselves whether in fact, not just international NGOs, but even national NGOs and even local NGOs, whether in fact today we are in a situation for survival, for resource raising and so on, whether in fact we have compromised ourselves to a point at which most of what we do actually ends up being incremental, baby step improvements, when actually what is needed is fundamental, structural, systemic changes. We all have our contradictions. I know as a human being, in my personal life, we live with contradictions. In our organizational life, we live with contradictions. I can tell you about a lot of the contradictions of power within Greenpeace, which is not about the world we want, and therefore we need to change. But I believe that there is sometimes a big ethical problem where if you think about what kinds of changes we as NGOs and other civil society groups say that governments and businesses need to make, and then we ask ourselves what scale of changes we as NGOs are prepared to make, you will find that there's a big gap. That the changes that we demand on others is that big, the changes that we demand on our operating reality is minuscule. And unless we address that, I believe we can be accused of not being as ethical as we need to be, and it's easier for those with power to ignore us.